YouTube channel. I want to welcome everybody tonight to the Great Valley NCAA Information Night. I'd also like to take a minute and introduce our presenters. First of all, we have Jeff Martin, who's a Great Valley High School counselor, as well as a Great Valley High School head football coach. We have Jim Van Blunk with us, who's the Senior Associate Director of Undergraduate Studies at Temple University. Jim also has two daughters that are in college right now, one who is a Division I athlete and one that is taking advantage of club sports. My name is Mike Semar. I'm a Director of Athletics at Great Valley School District. And in our program tonight, we're basically going to have three sections. First section is Jeff Martin will go over a ton of the updated background information. Then we're going to move from there to Jim Van Blunk, who will talk about the specific admission process questions that you might have about athletes, and then we will literally open up the question and answers. We're hoping this whole program is going to be about 45 minutes, about 30 minutes for us giving information, and then about 15 minutes of question and answer. So I'll try to keep track of the questions. If you have any questions, if you're viewing tonight, please feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll write those down. If we don't have a chance to get them answered tonight, we'll make sure we get you the answer. So I guess at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Jeff Martin.
All right, thanks, Mike. I'm going to share my screen here in a second. All right. So as Mike said, my name is Jeff Martin. I'm a counselor at the high school. We started doing an NCAA presentation as part of the counseling department evening hours, a few years back, and it was mostly held for the sophomore parent night. So when Mike came to me and talked to me about doing this, I thought it was a great idea to open it up from 8th grade to 11th grade. And he mentioned Jim as a great person, a resource that we can use. The counseling department has worked with Jim in the past for a lot of our evening presentations because he works in admissions and has been at Temple for a while. And also as a parent, he's kind of gone through this process as well, as his daughter is an NCAA athlete. So we're hopeful that you get some good information tonight. And I think it will be good for you all to hear. All right. So tonight, here's what we're going to cover. Basically, what the counselor's role is, the coach's role. Talk a little bit about athletic scholarships, NCAA eligibility, registering for the NCAA clearinghouse. Talk to you about the Great Valley High School approved courses and what that means per the NCAA requirements, and provide you some resources, some general resources that we feel will be beneficial. So just a couple of days ago, I came across this this tweet on Twitter that I thought was pretty, kind of summed it up. A lot of times, I'll get questions about, what do you think of recruiting agencies and, who can help? What are good resources? Honestly, I think a lot of the resources are free. And I think the number one resource I think that can be helpful through this process is going to be your high school coach. They can give you a lot of information about, assessing your skill level. Sometimes they're the direct person that's going to be in contact with the college coaches when the recruiting process starts. And then eventually when you start talking to the colleges, they're going to give you that information as well. So, they're also, like I said, they're going to be a good resource for you. Still letting people in from the waiting room. Sorry about that. And then the guidance counselor. So we're going to talk a little bit about what guidance counselors do and what we can help you with the process. Also your teachers, because at the end of the day, through the recruiting process, your grades are going to be the most important thing. You know, there's a lot of really great athletes out there, and you know, when a college is coming out to recruit your son or daughter for a sport, they're investing in them, so they want to make sure that, you know, not only are you going to be able to perform on the athletic field, but that you're, you know, going to do well while you're in college, and that you're going to be successful in the classroom. Um, so these are all your free resources. And in this tweet, you know, if you wanted to spend your extra money, you know, help with your grades and help with, you know, your training outside of school, I think that's important as well. Still let some people in. Okay. So how do counselors help? We at Great Valley, we meet with your son or daughter every year, at least one time per year, and we follow the, you know, counseling curriculum. So early on in ninth grade, we're going to get an assessment of, or have a conversation about what your son or daughter's goals are, and at that point, you know, talk about, you know, if they want to pursue college athletics. They may not know at that point, but some do kind of have an idea. So we're going to talk to them about, you know, taking the right courses, starting off on the right track, earning high grades, because again, going back to the college application process, you know, your grades are going to be the most important thing. And in ninth grade, that's what students have the most control over. You know, down the line, we'll talk to them about taking standardized tests and all those things. And, you know, going through the search process of, you know, finding the right college that's going to be the right fit for them. But again, we'll emphasize in ninth grade, their grades. We are all, you know, we follow, as counselors, we follow your son or daughter throughout high school. So we'll have them from ninth through 12th grade. And we're going to steer them in the right direction as far as taking the right courses, not only for if they are interested in playing college athletics, but making sure they're taking the right competitive courses, so that if they have a college in mind, that they're putting, you know, their best foot forward and having a strong academic transcript that's going to give them the most likelihood of getting accepted to that college. Okay, so I like showing this next screen. It's going to be a breakdown of, you know, where most athletes end up, whether it's Division I, Division II, or Division III sports. And it's broken down by sport. So as you can see, you know, it has a total overall. So for example, 7.5% of high school baseball players go on to play some level of college athletics. And then it breaks down that 7.5%. So as you can see, that's a pretty small number. You know, I think when, you know, as a coach and also as a counselor, when we have conversations with the players in ninth grade, everyone wants to play Division I. I mean, the reality is it's a really small number of students that end up going on to play Division I sports. You know, at that point, you know, we might not be able to know for sure if that's going to happen, but this is the reality. And just because Division I is not an option, I mean, Division II and Division III has a lot of nice opportunities as well. And going back to, you know, what I was saying, the importance of your grades, because, you know, at some point, sports, unless you're going to go play professional sports, sports end at some point. You know, whether you get to play 4 years of college sports, or it's 1 year, maybe you have an injury, you know, so we're again emphasizing the importance of, you know, the best fit for the college, for the student, to find a college that's not only good athletically for them, but is going to be the right academic fit, the right social fit, so that your son or daughter can be successful. All right, so the NCAA Eligibility Center, referred to as the Eligibility Center, it used to actually be called the Clearinghouse, and they changed the name a few years back. But essentially what the NCAA does is they assess every student athlete that plans to participate in college athletics, okay? In order for students to be able to receive scholarship money and be able to participate at the Division I or the Division II level, they have to register with the eligibility center and meet the academic standards to be able to participate. So I am going to walk you through that process. So this is a timeline. Again, as Mr. Semar said, this is going to be. Don't feel like you have to take notes right now because we are recording this. But this is basically a plan 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade on what you need to do if you're seriously considering college athletics. So again, kind of going back to 9th grade, you want to take the right courses and earn the best grades in those courses. All right. I'm going to talk in a few minutes about finding the approved courses at Great Valley. In 10th grade, if you fall behind, if you have, let's say you have a tough 9th grade year, it happens. Sometimes transition, you want to rebound in that 10th grade year and, pull your grades up and make sure you're taking the right courses again. At this point in 10th grade, you actually can register with the NCAA Eligibility Center. Although you don't have to. I think you can wait till your junior year. But in some cases, your elite athletes, there are some sports where, students will start hearing from colleges in 10th grade. All right. They did go back, the NCAA did go back and try to be a little bit more strict with some of these rules. You may hear these stories on the news where, an 8th grader gets an offer from, so-and-so. I think those types of stories are less. But it is possible in 10th grade, depending on the sport, that you might start drawing interest. And if that's the case, then you can go ahead and register for the NCAA Eligibility Center. Every once in a while, I have to take a break here real quick because there's people who are in the waiting room. So I apologize for that. In 11th grade, as I said, that's going to be the year by the end of your junior year. If you know you're going to be a recruited athlete, that's going to be the year that you actually want to create your account on the website. You're going to create an account. They'll give you a username and a password. They'll have an amateurism questionnaire that you have to fill out. Basically talks about what's your participation in the sport that you're participating in. Is it just within the school? The biggest thing is, you want to avoid participating in any type of competition where you actually might be receiving any sort of monetary, things in return. If that's the case, then you can actually void your amateurism and then you wouldn't be eligible to participate in college athletics. So that's a really important point. In junior year, students are also going to start taking their SAT and their ACT. So by the end of their junior year, they're going to submit their SAT and their ACT to the NCAA for your initial read. Make sure that all your information that you enter is correct. And at the end of your junior year, you're going to ask your son or daughter's counselor to send a copy of your transcript to the Eligibility Center. That's going to be when the NCAA first does your initial read of your credentials to just make sure that you're taking the right courses. It's not going to be your final certification, which isn't going to be until the conclusion of your senior year, but you're going to see things like your highly recruited athletes when you get to your senior year may be eligible to participate in an official visit. And if that's the case, basically what an official visit means, it means that university is going to pay your way to come and do a tour. So they might give you meal vouchers. Sometimes they might give you like a hotel room. And if that's the case, you actually have to be registered with the Eligibility Center to be able to do that. So when you get to the point where your son or daughter is being offered official visits, that's definitely going to be a time where you want to make sure that you have completed that initial part of your certification in the NCAA website. Your unofficial visits are going to be a little bit different. Unofficial visits, there's no limit on the number of unofficial visits that you can take. So when you go and tour a college and the college, isn't giving you meal vouchers, things like that, you can go on as many of those as you want, and you don't have to be registered with the clearinghouse to be able to do that. In 12th grade, that's going to be your final NCAA approval, and at the conclusion of your son or daughter's senior year, again, the counseling office will have to send a copy of your transcript. At that point, they're going to assess to be sure that you've taken all the courses that you need to, and you have a qualifying GPA and SAT or ACT score to be eligible for college athletics. All right, so a few things about the NCAA and assessing the academic requirements. So your GPA is an important piece of it, all right? Now, on a Great Valley transcript, you're gonna see that your son or daughter has a GPA. That GPA includes elective courses. It includes every course, phys ed, every course that your son or daughter takes throughout high school. When the NCAA assesses your eligibility, it's just going to be on your core classes. So that's going to be the 16 core classes that are required. And they're just going to be your core classes: math, science, English, social studies, and world language. And also important to note is they don't take into account minus and pluses. So if you get an A minus, it's the same thing as an A, or an A plus. It's the same thing. It still counts for 4 credit points. All right. So essentially, you're going to add those up and divide them by 16, and that's going to give you your overall core GPA. All right, so a core class, what is a core class? A core class is going to be a college prep level course, and that's basically what the NCAA looks at. They're not going to be some of your elective courses. They're going to be your core class requirements. And at math, it has to be Algebra 1 or above. So how do you obtain Great Valley's core classes, the courses that have been approved? You're going to go to the Eligibility Center website, which you can see right here. And once you're here, you're going to enter Great Valley CEB code, which is 392363. You'll put that in right there where the arrow shows. Once you do that, it's going to show you for each discipline the courses at Great Valley that are approved: your English, your math, your science, your social study, and your world languages. If the course is on that list, you're good to go. If for some reason you're comparing your transcript, your son or daughter's high school transcript, and that course isn't on the approved course list, then I would definitely immediately reach out to the counselor just to be sure that's the case. But most likely, if it's not on that list, it means it is not approved. All right, so Division I and Division II, their requirements are a little bit different, okay? So for Division I, there's a time limitation. So you have to complete 16 core classes by the time that you graduated. And it has to be within your 4 years from the time that you enter high school until the time that you are scheduled to graduate. Sometimes you might hear some stories, oh, my son or daughter took classes after they graduate. The Division I does not allow you to do that. All right. So that's a really important distinction between Division I and Division II. Division II, there actually is a little bit more leeway once you graduate high school, that between the end of your high school career and the start of your first year in college, there is a little bit of flexibility in taking courses to make up. Let's say you didn't have those 16 core classes, and maybe you had to make one up, or maybe your GPA wasn't quite there and you wanted to retake a course. Sometimes that's the case, and that can happen in Division II. Also with Division I, one of the new rules that they started, I want to say about 2 or 3 years ago, is they put, of those 16 core classes, 10 of those classes, core credits, have to be locked in at the conclusion of your junior year. All right. So you might hear of, or there's this potential of, maybe in your senior year, you're not quite there with your GPA, and you have to improve your core GPA for the NCAA. In some cases, students will retake a course. Let's say it was your 9th grade English course and you got a D in it, and you wanted to raise it to like a B or C. The NCAA would allow you in some cases to retake that courses as long as it's not a locked in course. All right. So basically 10 of the 16 core classes have to be locked by the end of your junior year. All right. So once you take those courses, all right, you send them into the NCAA. They assess you to determine if you meet the standards. It's basically one of three things. You're going to be a qualifier, academic redshirt, or a non-qualifier. Qualifier means you've met the standards and you're able to participate in athletics and receive scholarships starting your first year of college. Academic redshirt is something they instituted about 2 or 3 years ago. So maybe you're not quite there at that 2.3 GPA, which is the minimum GPA to be a qualifier, but you're right below it. There's a threshold of a GPA and an SAT or ACT score that you can still receive aid, but you can't compete in your first year of college athletics. And then the third one is going to be a non-qualifier. So you're not meeting the standards to be a qualifier or an academic redshirt, and therefore you're not eligible to participate in college athletics. All right, so this is a quick reference sheet. It shows you what the Division I requirements are, and it breaks it down by core subjects. So there's 4 years of English, 3 years of math, 2 of science, 1 year additional, 2 social studies, and then 4 additional courses as well. To the right, what you're going to see is Division I and Division II both work on a sliding scale. So basically what that means is if you look at the lowest GPA to be a qualifier, it's a 2.3, you would need to have at least a 980 SAT, okay? The more you go up, the higher your GPA is, the lower your standardized test score needs to be. So let's say you're at a 2.8, for example, then a 790 is going to be the minimum SAT score. As I went back, as I already explained this, this just gives you more explanation of that 10 core class requirement, and also breaks down that seven of them must be in English, math, or science before the conclusion of your junior year. And then at the end of your junior year, those 10 courses are locked in. So Division II also works on a sliding scale, but you'll see their standards are a little bit different. All right. So as I mentioned in Division I, there's 4 years of English required. All right. In Division II, it's 3 years. All right. So it shows you what that breakdown is. And their sliding scale looks a little bit different as well. You can see that they go lower than that 2.3 GPA. All right. So their standards are going to be a little bit different. And then there's Division III. All right. So Division III, you actually don't have to meet minimum requirements through the NCAA. You have to meet the requirements of that institution. All right. So you have to make it through admissions, and you have to, have a qualifying GPA and SAT score or ACT score for that particular school, not through the NCAA. And basically what it comes down to is Division III does not offer athletic scholarships. All right. And I want to say that again. Division III does not offer athletic scholarships. I hear it all the time. I've been doing this for a long time. My son or daughter got a scholarship from a Division III school. Well, it wasn't athletic. You can get academic scholarships, but it's not going to be for athletics. And that's essentially why the NCAA does not assess the eligibility, because there's no exchange of athletic money for that. Still letting a couple more people in, so sorry about that. All right, I mentioned this earlier. One of the other things that you will have to do when you create your account is you have to do an amateurism questionnaire, just to kind of reiterate that. And basically they want to make sure that in high school and before you enter college, that you haven't participated in sports and received any type of monetary compensation for participating, because at that point, you're going to jeopardize jeopardize your amateurism and therefore potentially would not be eligible to participate in college athletics. All right, so just to talk to you a little bit about taking my counselor hat off, putting my coach's hat on a little bit, and talk to you a little bit more about recruiting. Now, recruiting is really depends on the sport. You know, for example, if you're a runner, all right, that's probably the easiest sport to recruit because either you have the time or you don't. All right, as opposed to football, you can be a really good football player. You know, you have the height and the weight for that most Division I or Division II players have, but it's a little bit more involved. There's an assessment where the college coach is talking to the high school coach, and then eventually the college coach is going to want to physically see that player in a camp. All right, so it's a little bit more in depth. All right, the assessment process. So it really depends on the sport. You know, you hear about, you know, some sports are more like involved with club sports outside of school, which is a big part of it. Things like, you know, lacrosse or baseball. Some of their exposure is through those participating not only in the high school sport but the club sports as well. So I just want to, you know, kind of emphasize that, going back to what I said, it's really important to stay in contact with your high school coach because the recruiting kind of layout is going to look very different depending on what that sport is. There are rules on, you know, when college coaches can talk to you, when they can speak to you directly, when they can only speak to your high school coach. And if you go to the NCAA website, they break down the time period when your son or daughter can talk to a coach, when the quiet period is, when the open period is, when the assessment period is, and they give you a recruiting calendar for each sport. Now, the important thing is eventually your son or daughter, if they're being recruited, they're going to have conversations with the college coach is going to have a conversation with your son or daughter. And that's a really important piece of the process. The recruiters, their job is to bring in the best athlete with good, strong character and also with good grades. So, you know, being prepared for that visit when you go to see a college coach and you sit down with them one-on-one, you know what, you want to present yourself well. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. I talked to you a little bit about the official visits versus the non-official visits, just to kind of go back. You know, the official visits are going to be those ones where the college coach is really interested in that college, is really thinking about offering you a spot on the roster. So they're going to invite you to campus and offer to pay for your meals and potentially an overnight. The non-official visits are ones that you can take throughout high school. There's no limit on the number of those that you can take, as opposed to the official visits where, depending on the sport, Jim will be able to help me with that. I think it's 6, I want to say, per sport that you can do 6 official visits. I could be wrong about that. 5. Okay, so it's 5 official visits. So if you're a highly recruited Division I athlete and you have a lot of schools out there that you're interested in, you can actually only take 5 official visits. Social media is huge in the recruiting process. YouTube, Twitter, just speaking as a football coach, you know, players that want to be recruited, they're posting their highlight films on Twitter. College coaches are on there frequently, and they're looking for a great athlete. You know, kind of going back to what I said, you know, the resources that are free, you can be your best promoter, you know, as a student athlete. You can put your name out there. You can put your highlight film out there on social media. And one of the other things that you can do is every college has an athletics website, and they have a questionnaire that, as a prospective athlete, that you can fill out as early as your sophomore year. So if you fill out one of those prospective athlete questionnaires, that goes directly to the coach, and there's no harm in doing that. They'll ask you things like what positions you play, what courses you're taking, if you have any athletic or academic honors. So that's going to get them on their radar. So I think that's a really good thing to do. Camps, camps is going to be those opportunities where, whether it's a showcase where, like a lacrosse showcase or a baseball showcase that you can go to where there's college coaches that attend those. There's also camps that are held by the colleges through the summers where you can go on campus and you're going to be assessed by college coaches. For example, with football, you might go to a camp at Temple and they have multiple college coaches that attend from all over Division III, Division II, Division I. So you can get that exposure that way. As I said to you before, I get asked frequently about recruiting agencies. I think the most important thing is just do your research. Some of them charge you a lot of money, and I think a lot of the self-promoting and the things that you can do for yourself can be done without spending the money for that. And just to kind of reiterate those questionnaires, I think they're really a good thing to do. If your son or daughter is interested in participating in college athletics, the worst thing that's going to happen is you fill one out and the college never gets back to you. The best thing that's going to happen to you is you fill one out, the college coach maybe never heard of you or knows nothing about you. You've opened that line of communication. And basically that's what you want to do, that open those lines of communication so that you're on that college's radar and they're considering you as they, start to offer students for their recruiting class. This last slide, I pulled right from the NCAA website. I will say to you, I think I said it previously, if you go on the NCAA website, everything that I talked about tonight is there. They have a ton of really great links, about recruiting, the requirements. They give you advice, so I definitely would, check out some of these sites. I also would want to reiterate that it's really important to start strong. You can't wait until, your junior year to decide. It makes it really hard, so we emphasize when we meet with students in ninth grade, the importance of, starting off strong with that transition, earning the highest grades that you can in your classes, getting involved in school, being a leader, demonstrating good character, all of those things matter at the end of the day. So yeah, that would be my last piece of advice before I pass it over to Jim.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate that. And again, people, if you have questions, you can start putting them in the chat. And I would like to reintroduce Jim Van Blunk. Thanks, Jim.
Sure. Thanks. I feel like this is the easiest gig I'll ever get. Jeff, that was fantastic. I don't know that I could add too much. So let me just talk a little bit about kind of maybe how the process works from our end. You always see it from the high school end, but from a collegiate end at Temple, we obviously have our coaching staff that are out looking at prospective student athletes for their programs. And Jeff is exactly right. It's so different sport by sport, how they recruit, maybe even the roster size that they have to be able to work with. So each sport and each coach kind of does it a little bit differently. And so each of those coaches at Temple will work with our athletic compliance officer, and that compliance officer then communicates with me in the admissions office. So I've been the athletic liaison since I've been at Temple. So this is my 13th year, and we just work together. We want to make sure that the information that we get about a prospective student is accurate and as timely as can be, so that if a coach wants to bring you on campus for one of those official visits, we have the information that we need to be able to make that happen. And so for most of the coaches, they'll get a good idea of what your chances to be admitted to that school are because of people like me. So for example, the lacrosse coach might send to the compliance office 15 or 20 kids in the middle of the summer and say, I got these unofficial transcripts and test scores, and I want you to evaluate them and let me know what you think their chances of being admitted, to Temple are. And I'll do those pre-reads for as many prospective student athletes as any coach will want. And that includes every Division I sport that we have. I will say that rowing seems to be the one that gives me the most amount of work per season. I think because there's not a roster limit so much for rowing, so they can have a ton of kids on the team if they want. So those things all are working out. So I would highly endorse, again, what Jeff was saying about getting started right from the get-go of being a good student. If there's one way to make a coach really want you, is to be a great student. Because again, as Jeff mentioned, the last thing a coach wants to do is have to worry about you academically when they step foot on your campus. You know, we don't want to have to follow up and make sure you're going to class, or you're doing the assignments, or you're doing well in school. Like, that's not something that a coach wants to do. He wants to make sure that he or she is comfortable with your academic background. And then the big thing from my end, the admission end, is that just because you're being a recruited student athlete doesn't mean that you don't have to go through the admission process. And again, every college has a different sort of admission process. So at Temple, we use exclusively the common application, and students that are being recruited or students who are hoping to walk onto a program, they still have to go through that same process. So whether you're that superstar quarterback that everybody wants, you still need to meet the application deadline. You need to go through the process. You need to submit all of your supporting documents, write the college essay. Like, all of those things are still in play. And then we'll make an admissions decision based on that information. The majority of colleges are going to make decisions based on the strength of your academic program. So what kind of classes have you decided to take at Great Valley? And then how well did you do in those classes? We're also going to obviously look at your college essay. So that's a good opportunity to sort of tell us a little bit more about yourself that you might not normally be able to fit on the rest of the application. We're gonna look at those extracurricular activities besides your athletic. Like, what else are you involved in, or do you do other things? And we're going to read letters of recommendation that you get for us. I think a really good piece of advice that I would give you is that it's super important to be of good character all the time. I know a lot of college coaches who won't necessarily call your college coach, but he might call somebody in your conference that he knows or she knows. So they may not call Jeff to ask about you as a person because he coaches you every day, but they might call a school that you're rivals with and say, hey, what do you know about this guy or this girl or this athlete? Like, what's going on? So it's really, really important that you're always of good character. And it's also really important, and this sounds really silly, but it's also really important that what you post on social media is appropriate. And it's also really important to have an appropriate email address. So if you have a crazy email address, don't use it for your college applications, right? Make sure that it's appropriate. And it sounds silly, but you'd be really, really surprised at some of the things that we see. So from an athletic and academic standpoint, that's kind of the way the process works at Temple. Again, we feel really comfortable. I'm really happy because our coaches aren't allowed to call me directly, which is a really good thing. They have to go through our compliance office so that everything is monitored. That whole fiasco with Varsity Blues and people doing different things. We got together right away when that came out at Temple and kind of went through our process to make sure that there were enough checks and balances. And that's kind of what we do. So I'm pretty comfortable with our process. It's a really good one. But remember that if you send, for example, or you have your counselor at Great Valley send unofficial copies of your transcripts to a coach so that he can get pre-evaled, that doesn't count for your admissions application, right? We still need that application materials to come directly from your high school and not from our coaching staff, right? Same with test scores. Right now at Temple, we we demand that test scores come directly from the testing agency. So we won't even accept them off of a Great Valley transcript at this point. And they have to come from, like the SAT has to come from the College Board. So just understand that there's still that parallel track. Just because a coach really, really wants you doesn't mean that the application process is going to be any differently for you. Okay. And I do want to get the questions, but I just want to talk really, really briefly from a parent standpoint, because I think one of the most important things is that you find and that your child finds the place that is the right fit for them, right? And it has to be the right fit academically as well as athletically, perhaps socially, even maybe spiritually, right? There was a thing early on that Jeff put up, and we say it all the time. God forbid, what would happen if in the second week of school you broke your leg and you could never play your sport again? Is that still the right school for you? You know, will you still be happy there? Is that still the right place for you academically? And I think if you keep that in mind, that's really important. I will tell you in honesty, when I started the process with my twin daughters all those years ago, I had really long brown hair, and now it looks like this. So there will be some stress in the process, parents. But I think that if you work together and you kind of do your homework, I think it can work out really, really well. My one daughter is in that sport that Jeff mentioned that's super easy, running. You've either run times or you jumped high enough or thrown far enough for that coach to be interested in you. My daughter wasn't. She emailed the coach numerous times, and he didn't get back to her until she was already admitted to the university and was ready to commit. And she was a pure walk-on. She decided, looking at the roster and seeing what the other girls had run, that she could run with them, and that's something that she really wanted to do. My wife and I both tried to explain to her the commitment that she'd have to make, whether she was a walk-on or she was on scholarship at a Division I school. And she was fine with it. And so I'm really proud of her because she didn't make the team as a freshman, but she did as a sophomore. And he put her on the roster and she got to run some meets, and she's kind of right on the bubble of being able to go to away meets. Of course, now there's no away meets or home meets, but in normal circumstances, she's kind of right on the bubble, and she's gotten to travel a few places, but she's on a really, really good team, and she's kind of in the middle, but she's comfortable with that. You know, in other sports, are you going to be comfortable sitting on the bench at a big time Division I school, or are you better off going to that Division II school or even a Division III school where you're going to play a lot? You know, doing your homework. I'm a big believer in that you shouldn't pay people to do what you could do yourself. And I think if you can do the research, you know, you can go out to a school's website and you can look on their athletic page. And if you're a baseball player, you can go through the baseball roster and you can see how many kids and what years they are on the team at your position. And if you're a catcher and there's 4 catchers on the team and none of them are seniors, well, then, you know, maybe you have to assess what it's going to take for you to get on the field. Do they really want 5 catchers? So it's things like that. It's little things like that. As a parent, it's really, really hard when a coach says your kid's not good enough. It hurts. But you have to be realistic in what the end goal is. You know, again, back to do they want to sit on the bench for a really, really good program, or do they want to, you know, get to play a lot and expand? Because again, as Jeff said really well, at some point your athletic career ends. Like there's very, 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 very few people in the NBA and the NFL and the NHL and other places. So that was my one daughter. My other daughter just understood the commitment to Division I and said, you know what, I'm just going to go with this club thing. This is pretty cool. I still get to travel. She still gets to go. She's a triathlete now. Who knew? But she's on the triathlon team. She's the president of the triathlon club this year. They got to go to Arizona State for the national club triathlon championships, and her school paid, which was kind of cool. So she's getting to do her thing at the club level, and it works really, really well for them. But again, in the end, it's about the right fit. Yeah, and finding that place where your kids are going to have the best overall experience. So so I'll stop there and get to the Q&A so that we don't spend all night together. But thank you so much for having me. And I just wanted to say I did put my email address in the chat, so that if you have other questions later on, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys may have.
That's great, Jim. I appreciate it. So I don't know if anybody out there has any questions, if you want to put them in the chat, or I'm not sure if they can unmute themselves and ask the question.
Yeah.
Either or. Yeah, if
Yeah.
you want to unmute yourself and ask a question or put it in the chat, happy to answer those questions.
Well, we're waiting for people to talk, just to let you know where the full circle of, figuring out if you're going to be an athlete in college or not. Next week on the 8th of February is when we have our college signing day, where Great Valley invites any athlete that is basically gotten a roster spot for Division I, Division II, or Division III, or NAIA schools, that we come and we do a little celebration. We take a picture and so on, and we like to celebrate them because it's a really big deal. It's not an easy thing to do. To play high school sports and college sports is even more complicated.
As Jim was talking, I was thinking about a couple things that maybe I didn't mention that might be important. The one thing that I didn't talk about is, you hear of athletes who verbally commit before their senior year, and basically what that means. Okay. So basically when you verbally commit, one of the benefits of doing that is if you're verbally committed to a school, there's no limitations on the coach talking to you directly. So let's say you commit in your junior year, then the coach is likely from that school going to have regular check-ins with you. They're going to see, how you doing in school, how you doing in your sports, which could be a good thing, to help keep you focused and be prepared to make that commitment to play sports at a Division I level. And I think Jim talked about it a little bit, but if you play Division I sports, it's a huge, huge commitment. A lot of athletes end up going to school in the summer to take classes in the summer or during winter session, because if they compete while they're taking classes, they might have to take the minimum number to be able to travel and keep up with their schoolwork. You're going to have regular meetings with your coaches. You're going to have regular workouts throughout the school year. I mean, so it's a job. So, that verbal commitment kind of begins that process because it allows you to, form that relationship with the coaching staff a little bit in advance. It doesn't become an official until you sign your national letter of intent, which is going to be in a student's senior year. Once you sign that national letter of intent in your senior year, you're committed to that school, and you're taking whatever scholarship they offered you. And at that point, it becomes official.
Okay, well, if we don't have any questions, feel free, if you think of something tonight or tomorrow or next week or a year from now, please feel free. I know Jim left his email out there, but don't hesitate to contact Jeff or I if you have questions. I have a little college coaching experience as well. I think, Jim, you coached track in the college as well, cross country. And I went through the process as well of taking a look at Division III versus Division I. Can certainly talk about on the recruiting side, on the athlete side, what the expectations were to be a Division I athlete was very, very different than my friends who, decided to go Division II or Division III. So I'd be happy to share some of my experiences down the road if anybody has any of that. So, I guess at this time, we just want to again thank Jeff and Jim for sharing all your knowledge with it. Hopefully, we answered a few questions, and if we get some others, we'll answer them as they come.
Thank
All
you.
right, great.
Thanks.
Have a good night, everybody.
All right,
Take
great.
care.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Mike. It was great.
All right. Looks like we're good.
Pretty good. Yeah.
Thanks again, Jim. I'm sure we'll cross paths
Yeah.
again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Whatever you need, let me know.
All right, great.
We're pretty close.
All right.
All right.
Talk to you
Enjoy.
later. All right, bye.
Thanks.